talking about the funding options, because that happens to be the big question lots of people kept on asking after that presentation that the president did. Want to shed some more light on what is it with the budget? We're joined this morning by Taiwo Oyedele, who is of PwC. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Okay.
Well, he had to clarify there that no increase in tax, but they will just improve the collection of tax. And he said they could make a lot of money from that one. Aside those other agencies that you have surpluses, the CBN, the MASA, Customs, so many of them. But in terms of that funding question, to what extent does that address it for you?
Yeah, I think this is one question that we don't ask enough in Nigeria about how do we fund our budget. So we tend to focus our efforts on spending. So we spend time on, is this allocation sufficient? What should the benchmark be for crude oil? And we debate whether it should be 38, whether it should be 78. And we go on and on and on, which in my view, I think it's a waste of time and we're focusing on the wrong things. We should actually be asking questions about how do you bake the cake rather than is my share big enough? You look at it, for example, for 2016. We're saying that from non-oil revenue, we expect 1.45 trillion. If you convert that to US dollars, even if you use the official rate, you're talking about less than $8 billion. The entire budget itself is about $30 billion. For a country of our size, that is supposed to be other income. Even if you allocate the whole of that into infrastructure, it's not sufficient to do anything. For example, look at Angola. Angola is an oil-producing country like Nigeria. Population of about 21 million, just about the size of Lagos State. Their budget is $50 billion. Corruption is also very high there. So there's actually something wrong with the framework we have and the way we go about generating revenue. Now, the issue about surpluses from different agencies, NIMASA and the rest of them, is one question I've always asked, and I'm hoping I'll get the answer one day. If you look at 2015 budget, 2015 is just a few days, and we're going to be in 2016. The budget for the year hasn't been fully implemented. This is not blaming anybody, but it just so happened that we haven't fully implemented it. We're looking at around 60%. And then you're asking yourself, what happens to the remaining 40%? There should be carry forward of money that you haven't spent.
Doesn't that happen?
I don't know, because you see the budget will only start from zero. So we are looking for $6.08 trillion, naira, and there's nothing that says this is the money that we didn't spend from 2015.
In other words, they should have also explained to us, since this is a zero-based budget.
Absolutely. So accountability is also very key. And then you have agencies who spend money and keep whatever balances they have, and they don't remit those money back to government. So those are issues we need to deal with. Tax is one key component, but before you can even generate sufficient tax revenue, you must be able to earn the trust of the people, such that they have the moral justification and willingness to pay, knowing that when they do pay their taxes, it will be spent for taxpayers' purposes.
Okay, so you've raised a lot of issues now.
Yeah.
You've talked about baking the cake rather than sharing the cake, and it would seem that this cake for you is not big enough, and you think that, but some people think, my God, where are you going to get the money for this kind of budget? This is the first time it looks like we're doing something in the realm of 6 trillion naira, and so people are saying this is not a realistic budget. Where do you hope to get the money in this sort of economy? Are you convinced on the sources that the federal government is looking at to fund this, to fund the 2016 budget?
I am convinced, actually. Excuse me, I think that we can actually generate more than 6 trillion as of today. And we don't need to introduce new taxes.
Seriously? More than 6 trillion?
We can generate more than 6 trillion quite easily.
And you're not looking at borrowing?
And I'm not looking at borrowing, even though they have borrowing of about 2.22 trillion. I'm saying that we can generate 6 trillion. By the way, just to clarify, the budget of the federal government is not the total money we'll make. So that's just a portion of the federal government. So you have the federation account and federally collected revenue will be in the region of 10 trillion, if you look at it. But even that is small. Now, the biggest issue we're facing is the fact that we have a large base of people who don't pay taxes at all. I gave the example of Angola a few seconds ago. Angola does not even have value-added tax. Their corporate tax rate is 30%. Personal income tax rate highest is 20%. And they still generate $50 billion. So what that simply means is you've got loads of people out there who are not even paying taxes at all. If you get those guys to come into the tax net, from paying VAT to paying personal income tax, the compliance rate, for example, for companies in Nigeria is about 10%. You have about 90% of companies that are either not registered with the tax authorities, or are not filing returns, or are not paying taxes.
Are we looking at the companies registered with CAC, or we're looking at real companies on the ground?
It's both. It's both, because if you look at it, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. So if you go to CAC, you're going to find over 1 million companies that are registered. I agree with you, not all of them are doing business. Okay, but go to South Africa, for example. The companies that are with the South African revenue authorities that are actively filing returns, doing businesses and paying taxes are over 2 million companies. So let's even say in Nigeria there's supposed to be maybe 800,000. The companies that are with the FRS are 425,000. They said out of that, only about 125,000 are even filing returns. Not all of them are paying, by the way. And if you look at individuals, it's the same thing. It's even worse. Some of the states have nobody in their tax record apart from civil servants. Now, you don't generate revenue by that kind of approach or framework. We need to start getting to the habit of paying taxes and using tax revenue to fund public infrastructure and provide services so people have reasons to pay.
You know, I think you just brought one of the issues that is also causing some rift in some states about some very powerful individuals who have refused to pay taxes in such states. But if you look at it as we go into 2016, in a few days from now, there are so many uncertainties, the global economic issue, as well as political issue, and you come back home, you put it, put the security issue in perspective as well. How does all of this help us drive that kind of revenue you just highlighted by saying that it is possible for us to get that amount and even surpass it if we can, knowing that there are huge uncertainties in the world and back home here?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, a lot of uncertainties. In fact, yesterday or 2 days ago, I was reading a report that says that the price of crude oil could go down to as low as $5.
$5?
Yeah, they say between $5 and $20, which I think maybe is not going to happen, but even if it does, you know, I was even saying to myself, we don't know as a country how much it costs us to produce a barrel of crude oil, because you just never can tell. If the price falls to a point where we're spending more to produce than we can sell it for, we should just stop producing. Otherwise, we'll be losing money in the process. But back to your question, we live in the world where there is it has always been a world of uncertainties. It's not just now. The way I see it for Nigeria is that we can divide the uncertainties we face into two. They're the ones we have created for ourselves, and there's the ones we can't control. You can't control the price of crude oil. You can't control what America does with exchange rates or with interest rates and all of that. You can't control Iran. You can't control a lot of things. But guess what? You can control a lot of the uncertainties we have created around, for example, foreign exchange policy. If you look at it, for example, in tax matters, we're talking about generation revenue. A lot of uncertainties we have created for ourselves. We inherited laws as old as 50 years. And we haven't done anything to them. You have lawmakers who sometimes introduce bills for new taxes without asking questions about what exactly is wrong with the process. And I'll give you an example. There's a national security tax bill at the National Assembly as we speak. They're seeking to impose a 5% tax on goods and services or accessible profit, according to them, by Nigerian companies. Education tax was introduced in 1993. As we knew it, Nigerian universities were in the top 1,000 at the time. Today, no Nigerian university is in top 1,000. Guess what those guys are saying? They say we need to now increase that levy from 2% to 4%. Now, it's not throwing more money at the problem that will solve the problem. You need to ask yourself, what exactly is going wrong, and fix the problem. So if you can deal with the uncertainties we've created in the business environment, in paying taxes, in establishing businesses, then you can be able to attract more investment, both domestic and foreign investment. And the more companies and individuals prosper, the more your ability to generate tax revenue.
Let me follow up on that particular point.
Yeah.
The investment is one. Who was talking about multiple taxation? Companies, individuals, several people have spoken about it several times, even before now. But here we are talking again about, we need to ensure that people pay more tax, but that multiple taxation component, is it irrelevant?
It's extremely relevant. We have a disjointed approach into how we do things. And you can't get any result from those kind of ways of doing things. In 2010, Nigeria developed what they call a national tax policy, which was approved by FEC, by NEC, and everybody that needed to approve it. Brilliant document. But what did we do after that? We all forgot about it, and policymakers and leaders are, in my view, not even aware of the document. One of the issues that manufacturers face in Nigeria, for example, is multiple taxation. There are states in Nigeria where they pay more than 100 different taxes. Manufacturers. So they went to NEC, and I joined MAN to do this project about 2-3 years ago. And they said, well, you know what, let's harmonize all the taxes so we can reduce the number of taxes that companies have to pay. One, if you do that, you're able to address inefficiency because the collection mechanism in many cases is duplicated. And the more taxes you are trying to collect, the more the leakages you create. So the irony of it actually is when you reduce the number of taxes, you collect more. So the people pay less, but government collects more. Now, most leading countries in the world, the OECD, have less than 10 taxes that companies pay, less than 10. For us, they are in 10, 60, 100, depending on the state you go to. In an attempt to try and harmonize that, they gave this project to the Joint Tax Board. So let's harmonize taxes so the number of taxes we pay are not too many. By the time they were done, the official list went up from about 39 to over 60. And you know what? They just compiled all the taxes in different states because they needed to please, in quote, every state. Every state is claiming I have right to this tax. This one says I have right to this tax. So you just compile the list and say, you know what, you guys go and worry about it. 61 different taxes. There's no way you can grow, not even medium-sized company, let alone small companies. Even large companies are struggling.
Yet we're looking for investment to come.
Yes, you're looking for investment.
In the long run, this could also cause another problem, which you could also turn under the heading you just highlighted by saying that there are some that we have, who can say man-made or that we caused. That's unemployment. And I recall it was the former president of Obasanjo who described unemployment as a time bomb waiting to go off. By the time you start that kind of taxation on companies, and some of them alternately go under, you have more unemployed people in our hands, and you have less tax to collect. Is it difficult for them to get this understanding for maybe the researchers like yourself and consultants who go out and tell them what exactly it is that they should do, that stop all of this, streamline all of this into a lesser figure, and by so doing you get more money?
Yeah, I think there's the national thinking itself. It's not strategic enough. There's a lot of resources in Nigeria, brilliant people who have answers to our problems. You just need to harness them, just bring them together with the ideas, and there's even a lot of international organizations who are willing to help. And this, we're not reinventing any wheels. These are some of the things that have been tried and tested elsewhere. Now, if you need perhaps to amend the constitution so that we can stop the madness of introducing new taxes without getting results, maybe we should say, well, we recognize it's a federal system of government. States have right to impose tax within the ambit of the law, but you know what? You shouldn't have more than 10 taxes. So if you already have 10 and you need the 11th one, you must repeal one before you introduce another one. Because we have seen the solution is never introducing new taxes. It's getting people to pay the existing ones, harmonizing them, and using the tax revenue to take care of the people.
It's a good thing that you remind us that this is not the only budget. I mean, the state governments are also going to bring up their own budgets as well, and some of them have already started doing that. We've seen that in recent times things have been a bit tough for some of the states' inability to pay salaries. There have been talks of we can't even afford minimum wage. We think we want to reduce it. How do you think that we would actually fare in 2016? Looking at how we've done in 2015, you also spoke about excess monies. Even though I'm asking you a lot of questions at the same time, you spoke about excess monies, and we've had to do a supplementary budget in 2015 because it was seen that the 2015 budget did not adequately cater for some of the things that we did. How do you see us moving into 2016? Do you think that this budget adequately caters for us in terms of what we need to do at the federal level, and also how do you see the states surviving?
I'm actually more concerned about the states than the federal government. Recently, so there's this talk about we moved away from an oil-based economy. And I'll say no, we haven't moved away from oil. It's oil that has moved away from us. The only reason why you move away from oil is you replace the revenue from oil, from other sources. We haven't replaced it, so there's a big hole, there's a gap. At the moment, the exposure of the federal government is extremely limited. It's only about 800 billion they're looking for from oil revenue. Even without that, they can still implement the budget, they can meet with current expenditure, maybe they'll cut down on capital expenditure. But the states, they're all passing budgets, and they're all relying on federal allocation. And we don't know whether there will be anything coming from federal allocation anymore. Now, you can't pay minimum wage of 18,000 naira before tax. That's gross, right? That's less than $100. And at the same time, you are not thinking creatively, where do we generate revenue from? And you're saying that we want to have Nigeria that we're all proud of. We need these civil servants to make it happen. I do not think that anybody who is earning less than $100 per month that doesn't get paid on time, and it's even now uncertain whether that will be reduced, will be the most motivated person to implement anything. Reality on ground is we need to look inwards. And looking inward, for example, could be VAT. I'm not saying they should increase the rate. We can keep it at 5%. But get more people to pay. Based on the law, states, actually, VAT is supposed to be a state tax. But what we're doing is collecting it centrally and then sharing it to states and local governments. The federal government keeps about 15% for cost of collection. I don't know who does that. 15% is way too high. So in a way also, the states are not getting sufficient funds from the federal, and at the same time they are generating next to nothing. Maybe apart from Lagos State, many of them have no.
It's interesting that you say you don't know who does that, because if you recall the controversy with system specs and the TSA and how it's been implemented, and they're collecting 1%, and you saw the whole value in the Senate over that. There's an investigation currently going on. So you think that the federal government should actually reduce cost of collection? Don't you think the states can collect it by themselves?
At the moment, I do not have that trust that all the states can collect. Lagos State, for example, will do a good job. But what happens to maybe over 30
Can they
other
develop
states?
capacity to do that?
And I think at the moment, collecting it centrally is still good in terms of, imagine having 36 state tax authorities coming to audit your books. Just because you have branches in 36 states selling stuff where there's VAT applicable. I do not think that that's the right thing to do. Let's decentralize it, but improve the efficiency of collection. Globally, the benchmark is 1%. That's not to say I think that the 1% for the TSA is the right thing.
You call it, you just call it efficiency, but I want to call it transparency. Perhaps if we're transparent enough, I'm quite sure that would have been able to spur more people to pay taxes. For instance, I recall how Lagos State started a campaign. Every project they were doing then, they put a sign there to tell you that this is your money, taxpayers' money is at work. If we had seen over the years a lot of good development coming to the people, and people are being told that this is what we got from you, that is being used to fix or develop your community, don't you think that a lot of people voluntarily and willingly would have been able to key into this whole tax payment culture?
Yeah, I agree with you. We had an event about 3-4 weeks ago at PwC. It was a stakeholder event to talk about tax matters. So we had the head of FRS, LRS in Lagos State, and everybody was there. We did a live survey of more than 200 people at the meeting, and we just asked them, what's the reason why you don't like to pay tax? Gave a lot of options. And option one was, we do not see the benefit of the taxes we pay. Either rightly or wrongly, they justify to themselves why they shouldn't pay tax. You need to remove that justification. So I agree with you. Transparency is extremely important. But I do not think that it starts and ends with just telling us this road is being constructed using taxpayers' money. I'm going to ask you, how much are you spending on it? Should that be the first thing you do? We have state governments in Nigeria that are building golf courses, and they do not have water, they do not have road. So they're still spending taxpayers' money, but you question their priority, their judgment, in terms of where they're applying the money first and foremost. So it should be a combination of several factors. If, for example, you have any state or even federal government in Nigeria say today, these are the projects we're going to undertake, this is the cost, and you have a benchmark to tell us 1 kilometer of road costs so much. Let's compare with other countries. It might be that you have reasons why it should be more expensive in Nigeria, but somebody needs to explain it. Let's even have a balance sheet for the government.
So if you say transparency, for instance, what should we be looking at? I mean, we talk about it a lot of the times, but people are not quite sure in what form it should come.
Transparency to me is saying, whatever I've given to you, you go and spend it the way we've agreed. And when you finish, come and explain to me what you have done. That is missing in my view.
How do you want to see the explanation? That's
the way I want to see the explanation is, and this is across all levels of government, and then you break it down to departments and ministries. So just maybe you take transportation, for example. Transportation Ministry. Our allocation for the year was 200 billion naira. This is how we have spent 200 billion naira. Break it down by project. If possible, tell us who you awarded those contracts to and the process you went through. We have the Freedom of Information Act. People trigger it a few times, and it's a nightmare to get anything out. I want to know, for example, the taxes that the president, the vice president, the governors, the ministers, the lawmakers have paid. I just want to know. But that information is almost impossible to get. So transparency means if you have nothing to hide, then don't hide.
It's really deeper than what we thought.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is in this budget, I mean, there's a lot of focus on government. What about the private sector? Because the government is going to borrow from the same place where the private sector is supposed to draw funds from to grow their businesses. They'll be choked. So is the private sector, are they doing anything to ensure that they encourage more people to get into that sector, and the private sector works with governments to grow capacity?
Yeah, private sector would always be private sector. And what that means is they're not there to provide social services, to be honest. They're business people who want to make money for themselves. But what you need to do, when you're talking about unemployment and a lot of the other issues we're dealing with, it's the government to create the right framework for the private sector to thrive. When private sector thrives, they create employment. Now, the biggest impact that would make in Nigeria will not be from the money that federal government or any state government would spend coming from the budget. It will be from the policies. When telecommunication was deregulated, how much money did government spend? Nothing. In fact, they made money from it, hundreds of millions of dollars from licenses. Today, that sector, it's almost as big, if not bigger than oil and gas sector. So it was the policy. So if you do all of that, private sector, even if they decide that they don't want to be nice, they don't respect corporate social responsibility, they just want to do business, let them do business and collect tax from them. When you have collected the tax from them, use the tax for social services as you please.
So is the environment encouraging for them to keep
the environment is not encouraging enough. So we need to make it easy for, I was trying to register an NGO. This is just charity. And I've been on it for more than 6 months. Imagine I wanted to do a business and I need to register a business name or incorporate a company.
I thought they said you could do it immediately.
That's what they say, but if you go online now, you'll be lucky to even get that website to open in 30 minutes. Now, we have all these issues. We're not dealing with them. On one hand, we have huge hidden economy, and then you have large informal sector, and we're discouraging them from going formal because the process is just too complicated. There's nobody who's really asking, can we connect the dots here? Why is it so difficult who want to do genuine business? It's only when you grow, your people grow, businesses grow. That's when government can generate revenue.
Because the point I'm seeing here now, if we can actually formalize some of these small businesses, because if you ask them, almost everyone is willing to do that, willing to get them registered, willing to get a bank account opened. It will be easy for us to even get the taxes collected.
Absolutely. So the issue is not even reducing the tax rate for small businesses, like they said in the budget. Based on the law as you have it today, they already have a lower tax rate than big companies. But even whether the rate is low or high, they're just not paying. And they have their reasons why they're not paying. A lot of the information about them, you don't even have it with government. So even collecting data alone is a big thing that we need to start thinking about. Get data. If you just take the data of all the people who have mobile phones in Nigeria, that's a good starting point. And the telecommunication companies can tell you where the subscribers are based. So you can even tell by state. I can tell you that roughly, anybody who earns income and is liable to tax is likely to have a mobile phone. So which means by just analyzing that data, I'm not saying you must come and pay tax, but I'm getting your information. Use BVN, use passport when people want to travel abroad. Use vehicle registration. People buy land and property, they register with the state. Use that information. We have information all over the place. We're just not connecting the dots. Once you do that, make it extremely easy for people to do business. And the private sector, not private sector, the informal sector can translate into formal sector. And therefore, that increases your chances of raising more revenue to fund even further development.
Well, it's a question that will be, what also has the private, because they say that the private sector sometimes waits for government. It depends on government. They are spending for the year to depend on what government is spending and where it hopes to be spending money. From what you've seen in this budget, where do you think the private sector will be looking?
I think the private sector will be looking everywhere. Infrastructure is a big one. And if you also look at these services, it's also a big one. Manufacturing has been in recession for about 2 quarters. You'd expect that should pick up because if you have difficulties getting foreign exchange to import items, it says to any business person that this means huge opportunities to produce locally. Right. And when you talk about framework and policy, I keep going back to that. That's for me, is the key and the solution to our problems. If you talk about power generation, if you can fix power, it will open up the economy. Why are we not fixing power? You have 180 million people living almost in darkness. Why is that not a signal to the GAs, to the Siemens of this world, that this is a good mine? You just do the power.
Despite the fact that we have the population.
Exactly. Who are willing to consume and they're able to pay. But why would they want to do that? If you're going to spend about $5 billion, you want to be sure you're not going to wake up tomorrow and somebody says, you know what, you can't take your money out because we don't have dollars. People need certainty. You can't guarantee it. But make sure that the uncertainties you have are the ones outside your control, not the ones you create for yourselves. When you make the business environment more predictable, even if it means there's a premium that people need, they can do the calculation and the analysis. They have the money. They bring the money, they fix electricity, will pay, businesses will open up. Not now that you have small businesses, they can't even buy petrol because somebody says you can't bring jerry cans to buy. And then I saw on TV, someone carried their generator to go and buy fuel. Life can't be more difficult than that. I think we need to try and look closely at those issues we've created for ourselves that are stalling our development and fix them. It's not rocket science.
I'm looking at it more deeper now when you say issues we've created for ourselves, and if you put that with the CBN or the bank's policy now, you look at those who are in the IT sector, they deal with Forex a lot, online transaction, CAD, and even getting softwares and so many other issues. So with that kind of policy now, it just might likely ground their businesses, and which invariably will affect our tax collection from such people.
I think so. There's already Manufacturers Association of Nigeria complaining that
why aren't they seeing it that way?
I think it's the way we do things generally where we try and we make decisions and then worry about the consequences later. If you just do simple impact analysis, when you have any scarce resource and you allow discretions in allocating it, you are asking for disaster just waiting to happen. If you allow market forces to take care of that, even if you're going to say, you know what, I don't have dollars to give you for these items, you don't do it overnight. There are people who have entered into contracts. They have things on the high seas coming to Nigeria, and then suddenly you say, you know what, I can't give you dollars. And by doing that, we increase the uncertainty. And people who are actually demanding for dollars today are not all the people who need dollars today. But because there's so much uncertainty, you want to get as much as you can get and keep, pending where you need the obligation to be met in 2 months' time, in 3 months' time. And because we also create that artificial scarcity, okay, we're trying to limit demand, which cannot be done by just policies. We're widening the gap between the parallel market and the official rate. And guess what? People felt, wow, fantastic idea. You know, someone actually told me, say, you know what, just for the ticket to go to Ghana. Went to the bank, they got PTA, and when they sold the PTA that they bought from the official market and the parallel market, they had extra money, more than enough to take care of the ticket to Ghana, accommodation, and to return back. It was free holiday and vacation on government's money. And they said they caught someone at the airport a couple of days ago with more than 100 ATM cards. So this person is going across the border. They'll use different ATMs to withdraw money because you can withdraw dollars. So which means you actually buy from CBN. You just take the dollar back to Nigeria and sell in the black market. So we need to ensure that policies we introduce are not the ones that will solve one problem and create 5 more problems for us.
And this is not difficult to do.
They're
Because
not
we have a lot
difficult
of
to do.
experts in
Yeah.
this country who can
They're not
just
difficult
put
to
these
do.
things together. Well, thank you very much indeed, Taiwo Oyedele,
Thank you.
of PwC, giving us his perspective, and not just the budget, but its impact on the economy, and perhaps potential impact as well. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.